Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome, Dad, to our first episode of the Ask the Psychologist series. This series, we will be doing a lot more of these episodes over the summer, but it was just convenient because my dad is in town right now. But, so we'll get a lot more going in the summer. And this is just going to be a series where you guys can submit questions through my Instagram. I'll leave a tag right here. And we'll do this, and any questions that you think would be great for a psychologist to answer. My dad's a licensed therapist on faculty at Northwestern, knows his stuff.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking.
Of course. So question number one is, what did you write your thesis on?
It's a good question. I did my thesis on pretty esoteric title. It was called Sociotropy, Autonomy, and Social Problem Solving Among Inpatient Adolescents. So, in a nutshell, what I was looking at the time was what kind of causes depressive episodes among teenagers. And there's something called sociotropy, which is people who are high on social relating, high meaning like on a measure of social relating, or autonomy, which are high on a measure of achievement, and basically looking at if either of those in combination with different life events like a breakup of a boyfriend or girlfriend or not getting a good grade in school kind of triggered them into a depressive episode. And we did find that that those were related to their depression and impaired their problem solving, particularly the way that they were oriented towards solving problems.
It's pretty interesting. I don't even think I knew that. Question number two is, what fields of practice in psychology would you suggest? So someone that is in college right now, maybe they're a psych major, maybe a sociology major, or they have an interest in psych. What fields of study do you think they can go into, and why?
Good question. One field I think is really interesting, and I kind of wish I had done it when I was first in grad school or college, is forensic psychology, where you work in the justice system. And one kind of offshoot of that, which is really fascinating, is that you can get work, and it can be quite lucrative and interesting, as a jury consultant. So helping attorneys pick juries that will be sensitive to what they're looking for to help their clients, and is a very interesting field of work. So I think that would be one field that's really interesting. And then I certainly think that even though I do individual work mostly, there's always a need for really good family and couple therapists, I think, is another area that could use some excellent people.
Awesome. Question number three is, what's the most important book that you think everyone should read? Whether psychology related or just living a good life. Probably someone around my age that would be interested in learning more about just living a happy life through a book.
Probably the best self-help book I ever read, I think, is by Albert Ellis, who developed rational emotive behavior therapy, which was the original cognitive behavioral therapy developed in the late 1950s and early 1960s. He was a giant in the field, and it's called Feeling Better, Getting Better, Staying Better. A really good self-help book that you don't need a psychology background really at all to read, but it combines psychology and philosophy in a very easily understandable way, and is an excellent way to help yourself and train you to help others.
Yeah, I'm actually reading this book right now, and there's a lot of things that have just been helping me on little things on anxieties that I have or little phobias I have, and it's just ways that you can approach it and stuff that he has that has worked in the past, and he uses good anecdotes from other clients that he's had, and I think it's a great way to show a good intro to cognitive therapy. Question number four, or what are some daily practices I can do to be happier?
Well, certainly, I'd say the number one, well, not in any particular order, but number one that comes to my mind is meditation. Meditation is basically, it can be used for all kinds of things. I prefer to look at it like a self-control mechanism, basically something that you can use to learn how to sit with different thoughts, different feelings, different physical sensations, and learn how to respond to them or not respond to them. And that is such a valuable way of increasing your mental health and your ability to master how you respond to internal states. I also think that another thing that's really useful to do is to become cognizant of your self-talk, to learn how to track what it is that you're telling yourself in certain situations, and learn how the dialogue you have internally affects your feeling and your behavior, and how you might identify and challenge those thoughts and change them so that you can have more mastery over how you feel and how you behave.
Right. Just to add on to those topics, I mean, if anyone has seen on the channel so far, mindfulness and meditation has worked tremendously for me, along with other friends that I've gotten them to use it. And whether it's just sitting with a thought that I find uncomfortable or makes me anxious and just seeing that I can sit with that thought and it's okay, or learning how to bring my attention back to the breath, which then correlates to bringing my attention back to the present moment at every moment in life, which is great. And then another thing onto that other point was just back onto that Albert Ellis book. One of the things that he mentions a lot is humans, we tend to deal with absolutes when we think about things, whether it's, if I don't get to go home with a girl tonight and sleep with her, then I'm a failure. Mm-hmm. And we live in a world where we tell ourselves that if this doesn't happen, then I suck. When in reality, that's not necessarily true. And it's using your self-talk to learn how, just right. Because I want to take a girl home tonight, if I don't, I'm not a failure. I can always get after it next week.
Well, that's correct. But one important thing that you're missing there that's vital to Ellis's work, and really a great thing for everyone to know, is that he emphasizes the words must and should and how those are used in your own speaking. So, in fact, he was a pretty funny guy, and one of his sayings was shouldhood leads to shithood. So, in other words, to get back to Caleb's example, if you say, I must find a girl tonight to bring home, and if I don't, I therefore suck, then you need to challenge that must and change it from a demand to a preference. So in other words, it would be something like, yeah, it would be nice if I found somebody, but if I don't, that doesn't mean that I'm bad or that the world is terrible or that I'll never find someone. It just means I didn't find them tonight, and I can see if I can perhaps change my strategy to find somebody another time. But there's no rule in the universe that says I have to find somebody tonight, and if I don't, it means that I'm bad or that the world is bad or that other people are bad. All it means is that I didn't find someone.
Exactly. The next question we got here is just, how do I deal with pandemic fatigue? So this is just a term, I don't know if you're familiar with it, that people are kind of throwing around right now with just like, we're just fed up with this, not being able to go out, and as the vaccine's coming out and all that, but like just not used to interacting with people and getting back to the world. Like, how do we deal with all of that?
I think that, unfortunately, there's no easy answer, but I think using just basic good coping skills is going to help with that too. So certainly meditating, exercising, which is one of the things that we didn't mention in the last question, but of course is vital. Learning how to challenge your self-talk, and regarding pandemic fatigue, it means it's bad enough to have the pandemic, to be sure. But it makes it a lot worse when you say, I can't stand this anymore, it's terrible, it has to end immediately. And again, that gets back to this notion of all kinds of absolutes we have in our thinking. Instead of saying, I would prefer it if it ended immediately, but I recognize that it's not going to, and I best accept that fact and then work accordingly. And recognize, of course, that with the vaccine's becoming more and more prevalent all the time, that probably the worst is over, and that I just need to take a little bit more time, and then things will indeed be back to normal. And just reminding yourself of that as many times as you need to.
Awesome. Next question we got is, what is a good way or coping mechanism that I can use to deal with my constant anxious and depressive thoughts?
Well, as we've said, I think when you have anxious or depressive thoughts, it's helpful to think about it in two different strategies. Strategy one would be the cognitive behavioral strategy, which is if your anxious thought is nobody likes me, then what you want to do is challenge that thought by saying, is it true that no one likes me? Do I have evidence that nobody likes me? What are some of the cases looking back of people who have liked me? And if it's indeed true, obviously, that I have had some people like me, then therefore it can't be true that nobody likes me. So learning the strategies of cognitive therapy, learning the strategies of how to challenge and change your thinking is one important part. And the other would be meditation or mindfulness strategies, which is you have your anxious thoughts, but unlike in the cognitive behavioral approach, you don't necessarily challenge them. You just sit with them. And you recognize that having a thought is not a fact. The thought is just a thought. Thoughts come and thoughts go all the time. And that you learn to observe it and sit with it and then allow it to go on its own without getting emotionally involved in it. And I realize these are vast simplifications, but either of those methods have been proven in research and over millennia to be extraordinarily helpful. But like anything else in life, what they require most is a lot of practice. And when you get really adept at either or both methods, then you'll have a lot more power over your anxious and depressive thoughts.
How can I be more optimistic?
Well, optimism is, in its essence, an attitude. Optimism reflects someone's belief that things will be better in the future. And you can become more optimistic by learning how, again, to talk to yourself differently. There's a very famous psychologist at University of Pennsylvania, Martin Seligman, who did work on what we call learned helplessness, which was the idea that no matter what happens, you get the faulty belief that things will be bad, are bad, and will continue to be bad. And his work has been revolutionary in helping people to recognize that they can literally train themselves to think in a different way rather than a pervasive, pessimistic, helpless way into a hopeful and optimistic way. And this is not the power of positive thinking. This isn't standing in front of a mirror and sillily saying, in every day, in every way, I'm better. It means looking at the evidence of your life and recognizing how things could potentially be better in the future and working to make that happen.
Another thing that I've used that has helped me in the past, and we learned about this in my social psych classes, there's a term called magical thinking, and this is the idea that, we look back in hindsight and you're like, oh, if only I did this, or oh, I should have done this, or it could have been this way, and just thinking like that is just going to draw you back from reality, and it's going to make you think that maybe you could have done this or whatever, when in reality you didn't, and at the time what you did was what you thought was right, and by just confusing yourself and telling yourself that I should have done this, then you're not going to do anything except be pissed about the outcome. Mm-hmm. So another way to deal with that is to just not look back, because hindsight is always 20/20. It is to not look back and just say, you know what, I'm here right now. How can I make my situation better?
Right. And what Caleb's talking about, in essence, is practicing acceptance, being able to accept the decisions you've made, where you are in your life, the state of your life. You can't go back into the past, but you can change the future, and that's really the essence of having an optimistic attitude.
Next question is, what are some strategies I can use to deal with a specific reoccurring anxious thought?
So again, it would be within those two specific categories that we talked about.
The mindfulness.
Mindfulness or cognitive therapy. Now, with very specific thoughts, though, there are some interesting ideas that you could use to aid your ability to manage them. So, for instance, one strategy that we talk about, which is very interesting, is called worry time. And what that is let's say your worry is that you're going to get really bad grades and not get the kind of job or graduate school that you'd like. And so what you do in worry time is literally write those thoughts / worries down in some sort of journal form, and then give yourself 10, 15, 20 minutes a day of actually exposing yourself to those worries. So you actually review them, think about them, but in a circumscribed way, so only for that time. And this does two things. One, it kind of limits how long you're ruminating and worrying about it. So you say, I'll allow myself to worry about it, but only between 10 and 10:15 in the morning, for instance. And then the second thing is, if you keep coming back to the very same specific worry day in and day out at a very specific time, guess what happens to the worry? What do you think, Caleb?
It gets power?
Actually it gets less power, because you get bored of it.
Right.
Mm-hmm. This is what we call exposure. So it's just like if you were afraid to go into a swimming pool and every day you jumped in and you jumped in and you jumped in, over time you wouldn't be scared anymore.
Right.
So every day, if you keep rehearsing the same silly worry at the same times, then eventually it has less power over you and you habituate to it and it doesn't bother you anymore.
Another mindfulness technique that I've used for a situation like this is it's an acceptance technique, where instead of focusing on the breath this time, you sit and you focus on the thought. Every time your mind gets distracted, you repeat the thought in your head, and the emotion that arises, whether it's some people, they get sweaty palms, some people get increased heart rate, stomach drops, whatever, you feel that emotion, and the second that you turn your attention to the feeling of the emotion, you take your attention away from the thought into the emotion, and it kind of just lets you see that just because you're having a thought, you're now experiencing the emotion and you're with the thought instead of letting the thought torment you or run your life.
Right, and basically it's the same principle, because by sitting with the thought, it's an exposure exercise. It's allowing you to be with that thought and its accompanying feelings and habituate to them and recognize it's not going to kill you. And in that sense, think about psychology in general. It's not all that complicated. It's really about learning how to master these internal states. And a lot of that is about sitting with feelings or learning how to change the way that you feel through thinking differently. And a lot of it has to do with just having the courage to face it, which is exposure, so that you can habituate to it.
And then the last question we got for you is, how can I deal with my cravings, whether it's food like sugar or even things like I'm trying to drink less, but I'm very much addicted to alcohol or weed?
Yeah. Well, my specific area of practice is mostly in addictions, particularly with food. I work with obesity, weight management, binging, purging, bulimia. So this I'm very knowledgeable about. And when you're talking about this, there's of course many different things that you can do. But one quick acronym that might be helpful is to use what we call AWARE, AWARE. So to quickly go through that, the A in AWARE is accept. So accept the craving. Don't fight it. If you say, oh my God, I can't believe I'm craving this again, it just gets worse. Instead, accept it. Oh, there's that craving again. It's very predictable that I'm going to feel that way. Then watch. That's the W. Watch the craving as it comes and it goes. It's like a wave in the ocean. It comes up and it comes down. And your job is to, get on your surfboard and learn how to ride that wave. The second A in AWARE is to act despite the craving. So basically, you could chew gum and walk at the same time. Just because you're craving something doesn't mean you have to take it. You can just feel the craving and go about the business of your life. We do that all the time. The R is to repeat those first three things. So, if you're still plagued by it, go back. It means that you need to practice accepting, practice watching, practice acting despite having the craving. And then E is expect the best. Basically recognizing that as you practice sitting with cravings and not responding to them, you get better at it. It's a skill, like hitting a baseball. And people can master their ability to sit with craving and not respond to it. Further, expecting the best is also recognizing that not responding to a craving ain't going to kill you. All you'll do is feel uncomfortable for a few minutes and then it'll go away. So aware, and what we just went through, is a very nice strategy of sitting with cravings.
Awesome. Those are all the questions we got for you today. As I said earlier, if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And go ahead and leave comments about other questions you'd like me to ask, or follow me on Instagram and ask questions when I post. Thank you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed and hoped it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. It was fun.